It's time for war. Blood-soaked battlefields. Severed limbs scattered across the dirt. The screams of dying men echoing for miles. This isn't some Hollywood movie. This was reality for ancient warriors. Imagine you're standing in the middle of such battlefield. The ground beneath you is shaking. War horns blare in the distance. The air is thick with the stench of blood, sweat, and fear. Around you, thousands of warriors prepare for what might be their final fight. No mercy, no second chances, just survival. Historical wars isn't just about dates and dead kings. It's about moments like these. Battles so fierce, so catastrophic, they change the course of civilization itself. And today, we're looking into the bloodiest battles in ancient history. Wars so brutal, they make modern warfare look like a playground scuffle. Some of these fights ended entire dynasties. Others wiped out nearly entire armies in a single day. And one of them, it was so deadly, it forced an entire empire to rethink its future. Trust me, you don't want to miss this. Let's start with the Battle of Kalinga, 216 BC, a masterclass in destruction. The Roman Republic, confident, cocky, and convinced of their own superiority, marched a massive army of 86,000 soldiers to crush Hannibal, the Carthaginian general who had already humiliated them twice. This time, Rome thought they had him outnumbered. Instead, Hannibal pulled off one of the most insane military maneuvers in history. He let the Romans push forward, then surrounded them in a perfect crescent formation. The result? 50,000 Romans slaughtered in one day. But let's adjust how Hannibal pulled this off. This wasn't just luck, this was military genius on another level. Hannibal positioned his weakest troops in the center, knowing full well they would bend back under Roman pressure. This wasn't a mistake, it was the plan. As the Roman infantry pushed deeper into what they thought was a collapsing line, Hannibal's elite African heavy infantry on the wings held firm. Then, at the perfect moment, they pivoted inward, while his devastating cavalry swung around from behind. Imagine being a Roman soldier in the middle of this nightmare. You started the day confident, marching forward, pushing back the enemy center. Victory seems certain. Then suddenly, you're being attacked from three sides. The formation tightens. Men are packed so closely together they can't even raise their weapons. Panic spreads. The slaughter begins. 50,000 lives erased in just a few hours. So many bodies lay on the ground that soldiers had trouble walking without stepping on corpses. Survivors said the river ran red with blood for days. Rome was so shaken by the loss that they literally had to change their recruitment laws because they didn't have enough men left to fight. Now that's a defeat. And get this, among the dead were 80 senators. That's almost a third of Rome's entire Senate. This would be like losing 30 US senators in a single day. The psychological impact was devastating. Rome, for the first time, faced the very real possibility of total destruction. But if you think Kalinga was bad, wait till you hear about the Battle of Chongping, 260 BC, because this one, it's straight up nightmare fuel. Ancient China's Qin and Zhao states had been at each other's throats for years. When the final battle came, the Qin general by Qi played the long game. He tricked the Zhao army into splitting their forces and trapped 400,000 soldiers. Yeah, you heard that right, 400,000 men completely surrounded. What happened next? Brutal. The Zhao surrendered, but Bai Qi wasn't feeling generous. Instead of taking prisoners, he ordered them all to be buried alive. No negotiations, no mercy, just cold, calculated extermination. This wasn't just a typical battlefield encounter. This was a siege that lasted for years. The Zhao commander, Zhao Kuo, had been specifically warned not to engage Bai Qi directly. His father, a veteran general, knew Bai Qi's reputation as the human butcher wasn't for show. But young Zhao Kuo was confident, perhaps too confident. After initial success, the Qin forces cut off their supply lines. Starvation set in. Discipline broke down. Desperate men ate their leather armor, then the weaker soldiers. When surrender finally came, there would be no prisoner exchange, no honorable captivity. Bai Qi ordered pits dug, and 400,000 Zhao soldiers, starved, weakened, and defeated, were thrown in and buried. Imagine that sound. Hundreds of thousands of men screaming as dirt covered their faces. That's not a battle. That's genocide. The impact? The Zhao state never recovered. Their military was effectively wiped out in a single stroke. Within a generation, the Qin would conquer all of China, unifying the country under the first emperor, Qin Shi Huang. One battle changed the entire future of Asia. Fast forward to 331 BC, and we have one of the most legendary battles in history, the Battle of Gaugamela. Alexander the Great, the most ambitious conqueror of his time, facing off against the Persian king Darius III. The odds? 200,000 Persian troops against 47,000 Greeks. The Persians had war elephants, side chariots, and sheer numbers. Alexander had one thing they didn't: tactical brilliance. He attacked where they least expected, sliced through their formations, and forced Darius to flee like a coward. By the time the dust settled, over 50,000 Persian troops were dead. And Alexander? He walked away with an empire. That's how you go from a prince to a legend. But let's break down exactly what made this battle so revolutionary. The Persians had prepared the battlefield meticulously. flattening the ground to give their chariots maximum effectiveness. These weren't ordinary chariots. These were ancient killing machines with razor-sharp blades attached to the wheels, designed to slice through infantry formations like a hot knife through butter. Alexander's response? Pure tactical innovation. He arranged his infantry in a unique formation, sections that could separate on command, creating lanes for the chariots to pass through harmlessly. Imagine the precision required. One mistimed order, and those bladed wheels would have turned his men into minced meat. But Alexander wasn't just playing defense. While the Persian line was distracted, he spotted a gap near where Darius was positioned. Leading his elite companion cavalry, Alexander charged directly at the Persian king, not at the army, but at the man himself. This was psychological warfare at its finest. When Darius saw this hurricane of horsemen coming straight for him, he panicked and fled the battlefield. The result was catastrophic for the Persians. Without their king, the massive army lost cohesion. What began as a battle became a slaughter. Alexander's forces pursued the fleeing Persians for miles, cutting them down from behind. Over 50,000 Persian soldiers died that day, while Alexander lost just 1,000 men. With this single victory, Alexander gained control of the entire Persian Empire, the largest empire the world had known until that point. All of modern Iran, Iraq, Syria, Egypt, Turkey, and parts of India fell under his control. One battle changed the map of the ancient world forever. And speaking of legends, let's talk about the Battle of Arausio, 105 BC. Rome once again found itself in deep trouble. This time against the Cimbri and Teutons, two Germanic tribes looking for new lands. Here's the problem. The Roman generals in charge? They hated each other. Like they literally refused to work together. And what happens when your army is led by bickering, egotistical commanders? Disaster. The Roman Republic sent two armies to deal with the Germanic migration. One led by the consul Gnaeus Mallius Maximus, and the other by the proconsul Quintus Servilius Scipio. Now, Scipio was a patrician, old money, prestigious family, massive ego. Mallius was a new man, the first in his family to reach high office. Scipio was so offended at having to take orders from someone he considered a social inferior that he refused to camp with the main army or coordinate battle plans. The Romans were caught in a deadly trap. In a single day, over 120,000 Roman soldiers and civilians were wiped out. Some were cut down in battle. Others drowned while trying to escape. The aftermath was so horrific that Rome had to lower its military recruitment age just to keep its legions alive. Imagine losing so many people that you have to let teenagers fight your wars. That's how devastating this was. The survivors brought back tales of absolute horror. The Germanic warriors had vowed to sacrifice everything they captured to their gods. They didn't just kill the Romans, they destroyed everything. Prisoners were hanged from trees. Horses were drowned in rivers. Gold and silver were thrown into lakes as offerings. Even weapons were deliberately broken. The psychological impact was so severe that Roman citizens began to fear the complete destruction of their republic. For years afterward, Romans would reference Arausio as their darkest day. And all because two generals couldn't put their egos aside. But if we're talking about sheer scale, nothing comes close to the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains for 151 AD. Attila the Hun, the so-called Scourge of God, was tearing through Europe like an unstoppable force. Rome, desperate to stop him, teamed up with the Visigoths for one final stand. The result? A massive clash that historians call the last great battle of the ancient world. Tens of thousands fell in just one day. Bodies littered the fields. Blood soaked the earth. And while Attila survived, this battle marked the beginning of the end for his empire. This wasn't just another border skirmish. This was the ancient equivalent of a world war. On one side stood Attila with an estimated 200,000 warriors. Huns, Ostrogoths, Gepids, Franks, and various other tribes. On the other side was the Roman general Aetius with his unlikely allies, Visigoths, Alans, Burgundians, and Saxons. Former enemies united against a common threat. The battle itself was apocalyptic in scale. The fighting was so intense that some accounts claim a small stream running through the battlefield swelled into a raging torrent of blood. Soldiers reportedly drank from this bloody creek to quench their thirst during the battle. That's how desperate things became. The fighting continued from afternoon until nightfall, with neither side gaining a decisive advantage. In the darkness, the screams of the wounded created a haunting backdrop as soldiers struggled to find their comrades among the corpses. By dawn, the field was so covered with bodies that the survivors had to climb over mounds of the dead to continue fighting. When Attila finally retreated, he did so with dignity, creating a massive funeral pyre of saddles, prepared to throw himself into the flames rather than be captured. While he survived this battle, his aura of invincibility was shattered. Within 2 years, he would be dead, and his empire would crumble. This single confrontation quite literally saved Western civilization as we know it. Now let's talk about a battle that literally changed a man's soul. The Battle of Kalinga in 261 BC. Emperor Ashoka of India's Mauryan Empire wanted to expand his already massive territory by conquering the independent state of Kalinga. What should have been a routine conquest turned into something far more profound. Ashoka's forces were superior in every way, better trained, better equipped, more numerous. The Kalinga warriors fought with incredible courage, but the outcome was never really in doubt. What was unexpected was the scale of suffering. Over 100,000 Kalingan soldiers died in the fighting. Another 150,000 civilians were forcibly deported from their homeland. Countless others died in the aftermath from wounds, disease, and starvation. The day after his victory, Emperor Ashoka walked the battlefield. The Daya River had turned completely red with blood. Bodies were piled so high they looked like macabre hills. The moans of the dying created a chorus of agony that could be heard for miles. Standing amid this carnage, one of history's most remarkable transformations occurred. Ashoka, the conquering emperor, was overcome with remorse. The man who had waged war without hesitation suddenly saw the true cost of his ambition. He converted to Buddhism on the spot and renounced violence entirely. The rest of his long reign was dedicated to peace, compassion, and spiritual enlightenment. Imagine that. A battle so horrific it turned one of history's greatest conquerors into a pacifist. Ashoka would go on to spread Buddhist teachings throughout Asia, his influence reaching as far as Japan and Southeast Asia. One bloody day on the battlefield changed the spiritual history of half the world. So what do all these battles have in common? They weren't just about numbers or weapons. They were about strategy, ambition, and sometimes pure madness. These fights weren't just clashes between armies. They were moments that shaped history itself. The decisions made in a single day, often by just one or two individuals, changed the course of entire civilizations. Empires rose and fell based on battlefield choices. Religions spread or were suppressed because of military outcomes. The world map was redrawn time and again by men wielding bronze and iron. And perhaps the most sobering thought of all, the numbers. At Kani, Chongping, Gaugamela, and the others, we're not just talking about statistics. Each number represents a person. Someone's son, father, brother. Someone who had hopes, dreams, and fears. Someone who likely died in pain, far from home, wondering if their sacrifice would mean anything. The scale of ancient warfare was truly staggering. In an age before gunpowder, before mechanized killing, the sheer human effort required to produce such catastrophic death tolls is almost incomprehensible. These weren't quick deaths from bullets or bombs. These were brutal, intimate killings, face-to-face blade to flesh. If you've made it this far, you clearly love history as much as we do. And if you want more mind-blowing stories from the past, do yourself a favor, hit that subscribe button. It takes 1 second, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Because history, it's way crazier than fiction. See you in the next one.